Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be with you today as we discuss IT systems performance. We want to discuss how to prevent performance issues from becoming the Achilles heel of your business. Well-defined business criteria and a thorough understanding of your marketplace should be driving functional and performance requirements. AppLabs has been in the software and systems performance business for a long time. Throughout the years, we have seen many IT applications put into production without an understanding of the performance capabilities of the systems. Even worse, sometimes without even having a clear expectation of what the anticipated performance objectives should be. At AppLabs, we believe that an essential part of IT systems lifecycle is requirements. Along with functional requirements, planning, design, development, testing, and deployment, there should always be a consideration for the anticipated or required performance of an application. Just as functional requirements should be clearly defined and documented, performance requirements should also be clearly defined and documented. Performance-related outages have caused devastating financial effects on businesses. This news clip from Yahoo News describes a major online retailer that suffered an outage. In this case, the company stock was affected by the outage. In another story, an online video retailer had to make up for an outage by compensating customers with rebates. The news headlines have been full of high-profile website disasters. I guess the good news in this last case was that only the website crashed. In all of these cases, you have to consider the business that was lost, as well as tarnished relationships because of outages. This type of event happens regularly and affects a lot of people and businesses. Most stories don't ever make it into the news. Poor application performance is never considered a good thing from a business perspective. I can only think of one instance where poor performance was considered a benefit, that being when my kids were so happy when the school website was down because it could not handle the load, and parents were unable to get grade reports. One of the biggest reasons that we see in the industry for the lack of performance planning and testing is the belief that performance problems can be easily fixed by simply adding hardware into the equation. In some cases, you might be able to postpone performance issues by adding hardware. In some cases, adding hardware will not provide any benefit at all. I witnessed a web application sitting on more than $35 million worth of hardware that rolled over at about 7 concurrent users. I realize this is an extreme case, but things like this do happen. In an article by Gartner, the commentary was made very clear that adding hardware to performance problems is not the solution to solving website outages. We also see reluctance to setting goals and testing around specific performance objectives or requirements. Some of the reluctance is because of a lack of understanding of the purpose for performance requirements. Performance requirements should be a tool that is used to ensure that your IT software is designed, built, and tested to meet your business needs. If everyone understood that performance goals are used to ensure that business objectives can be met, application deployment just simply would not start without testing conducted against performance requirements. Other reluctance is due to very short or unrealistic deadlines. When schedules get tight, portions of the testing often get reduced or eliminated. Budgets. What can we say about budgets? If no requirements are created to specify performance goals, then there will likely be little or no budget allocated for performance testing. To ensure that you have budget to conduct adequate testing, work to get performance requirements into the project. I think Tom Gilb said it best when he stated that projects without clear goals will not achieve their goals clearly. Recent studies have estimated that at least half of the performance-related problems in IT systems can be traced back to a lack of clearly defined goals. Many of these issues are further complicated by non-existent or incomplete performance requirements. Without clearly defined performance goals or requirements, budget will not get set aside for performance testing, sufficient time and schedule cannot be estimated for adequate and accurate performance testing, and test cases will not have clearly defined goals and will not have a pass-fail criteria. In today's discussion, we are going to discuss things that need to be considered for performance testing, specific tasks associated with performance testing, and why it is important to make goals and requirements an integral part of performance testing efforts. It is no longer sufficient to simply conduct performance, load, and stress testing. Performance testing needs to have clearly defined requirements and goals. These goals will define the pass-fail criteria for all of the testing efforts. Let's see, before going on to the next slide, I want to grab one of these questions here. The question is, how do you convince your upper management that performance testing should be requirements driven? So, this can be a difficult task if the upper management doesn't understand the performance or the purpose of performance testing. So, as we discussed earlier, some of the reluctance might be because of a lack of understanding around the purpose, the time constraints, and possibly limited budgets. Funny thing though, whenever there is a performance-related problem, the blame is directed at the team that tests the application. Rarely does the blame make it all the way back to the fact that there may have been a lack of planning, requirements, and specifications. So getting back to the original question, I believe the best way to convince upper management to start putting requirements around performance initiatives is to show examples of performance failures and relate those back to revenue that was lost. Everyone understands lost revenue. Let's see, I think we have time to grab one more. It says, the question is, what are some of the criteria to consider when planning performance requirements? So you might be looking for an answer related to the number of users or transactions or throughput or maybe even response times. But this really goes back to, well, it should really be business driven. So what should be considered is who the consumer is, how much of the system is going to be consumed. This will be the basis for creating performance requirements. Alright, let's segue back into the next slide here. There are many things to take into consideration when planning performance requirements for software applications. Plan for consumer requirements. It is critical to understand who or what will be using the applications and consider what the performance expectations will be. You should also take into consideration the markets you are in and what acceptable industry expectations or standards are as well. You need to plan for data. It is important to anticipate and plan for the types and amounts of data that are anticipated or required to meet business needs. Plan for traffic. It is important to understand the rates at which the data will need to be transacted in order to meet business goals. So plan to meet business needs. If there's an understanding of the amount of business that needs to be conducted within the application, this should be used to formulate the basic performance requirements of the application. For performance testing requirements, it all boils down to the business needs. What is the business that needs to be conducted within the application to meet the consumer needs or meet the financial targets? The performance goals and requirements should be set by the business analysts, not dictated by development or testing teams. Everyone within the organization has a role to play